Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Well, hello, and welcome. Welcome to our podcast listeners out there. This is the next in the series, and we're really delighted to have another special guest with us, Harry Benson. Harry, welcome, and thank you for making the time to join us on this podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Good to have you. And there's so much wealth of knowledge and experience that Harry brings. We want to do it properly, and Jon's going to give us a bit of a bio so you know more about the man behind the camera this morning.
Absolutely. My real pleasure and privilege to do that. I mean, Harry Benson is one of Britain's leading champions for marriage. We've known Harry for a number of years now, and can endorse that wholeheartedly. As research director for Marriage Foundation, his findings are routinely cited in the UK media and by politicians, and have made front page news on several occasions, including today. As we speak to him,
winning.
I can flash a copy of the Times, the UK
Times.
Times here on camera there.
How about that for timing?
I know, amazing. They knew you were on our podcast, so they decided to publish it this morning, right?
Exactly.
Having said that, Harry's no stranger to being on the front page of news and on the TV or what have you, but great to have that connection with today. So Harry's taught relationship courses to thousands of couples and written several books on marriage and relationships. A former Royal Navy helicopter pilot, might not have guessed that, but he's currently in his final year also of a PhD in social policy at the University of Bristol, looking at the role of commitment in the timing of marriage, which is something we're going to be talking a fair bit about today in this session. So Harry's been married for 37 years. Congrats on that.
Thank
6
you.
young adult children. And as of this week, 1 grandchild.
Yay,
Yeah.
new status.
This is
there.
This
So
is a
hopefully,
winning week.
hopefully, he's definitely himself and wife and family are doing something right. So congrats. Well done. And thank you so much for being with us.
Skin of teeth, I have to tell you. It's absolute skin of teeth.
Oh, amazing. Well, we've known you for a while. We've learned so much from you already, Harry. Really looking forward to
Thank
the
you.
conversation today. Didn't know about Royal Navy pilot, but it's consistent with the theme of you flying high. So we get that.
Yeah,
we want to get behind. There's so much passion that comes across in the work that you do. Would love to understand the genesis of it. Where does all of that come from? And then you can tell us what the passion is today.
I think the root of it, like for many people, is you go way back into childhood. And I'm not going to dwell on this too long, so I'm not going to linger on it. But my parents split up when I was 3. I was sent to boarding school at 7. I had a very privileged upbringing on the outside, but on the inside, it was difficult, very difficult, being sent away effectively and not seeing my dad hardly ever, and then mum sending me away to boarding school for long periods of time. So that's really, 10 years of childhood. And that framed how I saw the world. And I realized that I had to be very independent. I had to do things on my own. And I also realized that it was better not to feel. So I could do the sort of football type feelings, I'm gutted or I'm over the moon when someone scores a goal. But that was about it. I had no vocabulary of feelings and I think many English boarding school boys fall into this category. But it was just a double whammy of having parents split up. Back in the 60s when it was very rare, there were very few divorces in those days. And so when I was at boarding school, I was the only one in my school, actually, in my primary school, who had divorced parents. You compare that to now, and it's nearly 50%. Just extraordinary.
Our eldest was at university recently and in lockdown, talking about parents and families and so on. I think she was the only one with parents still together. And it's like 12 of them on the dorm.
Yeah,
but I can just imagine the emotions of having to process it and being the only one as well going through it.
Yeah, well, I had a brother as well, and then my mother remarried when I was 9, and she told me about her marriage after she got married, which was hilarious. She'd moved to South Africa, and I was still at school in England. So I got a letter saying, "Oh, by the way, Harry, I'm married." So that's kind of cool. And
Oh,
actually,
dear.
funnily enough, that's not even a big deal in my life, So
Wow.
it's the other stuff. Anyway, so I came out of school as a young adult, having sort of romantic ideas about the world, but also knowing that I had to make my own way. And I joined the Navy as a helicopter pilot. I went to war in the Falklands, flew in Norway, Northern Ireland, that sort of thing, as a young commando pilot. So a bit of sort of action man stuff as a young man, very capable, very institutionalized, though.
Mhm.
And then along the way, I met Kate, who is my now wife. So you know the happy ending. But
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
there's a long and winding road to get to that. And so we got married when we were quite young, but not abnormally young in the 80s. I was 25, Kate was 22. And
Mhm.
it all seemed very right. And it was what we did. We got married. If you met someone then, cohabiting was much less of a thing. Even in the 80s, it was just still only really beginning to take off.
Yeah.
And we got married, and we moved out to Asia. I left the Navy. We moved out to Asia, and I went into finance. And that all worked very well. And it was great fun. We had a fantastic time. But we slowly drifted apart, particularly after our first child, first two children were born in Asia, where we were very sort of royally spoilt as expats. And so again, on the outside, we looked great, but on the inside, our relationship
yeah.
was a right old mess. And it's a very classic thing for parents to drift apart, I think. When the baby's born, mum inevitably focuses on the baby. Dad says, well, what can I do to make things good? And so he busies himself with earning the money or
With work,
doing stuff. And so we fell into very stereotypical roles and became very capable, functional parents. But as a married couple, we were a mess. And because I was so emotionally close, I had no idea what was going on. And so it was eventually about 8 years into our marriage that Kate confronted me, and she said, she'd actually become a Christian, and I was head full on atheist at this stage, and so think Richard Dawkins. It was all a complete load of nonsense, or rather, it was either true or it was absolute rubbish, and I was on the rubbish end of the spectrum. And she'd gone into this weird world. And I think it triggered a confrontation. So we had a confrontation about this. If you're not my friend, and we're not having a great relationship, and if things don't improve within a year, then that's it, game over. And we had two young children. I never saw it coming at all. I had no idea what she was talking about because I had no vocabulary of emotions. And so over the next 6 months, a bunch of stuff happened. And I knew, my goodness, I've got to make this work. Initially for the sake of the children, which ultimately means me. But it wasn't until I realized about 6 months down the line, when she wrote me this very despairing letter of what it was to be Harry's wife, job spec, terms and conditions, hours, responsibilities, holiday, pay, all that sort of stuff. But what I really want, she said in this letter, is a friend. Will I ever get one? Who knows and who cares? And she wrote those last two words, who cares, in capitals. And it completely blew me away. And I'd been to therapy at that stage, actually, to deal with the sort of being emotionally closed stuff. So I'd opened up. I'd even become a Christian, which was mad because that was totally unexpected for an atheist. None of that helped at all, although it was obviously an important part of the journey. And then eventually, she wrote this letter, and I was, I suppose, ready to receive it at that stage. And I suddenly realized, my God, what have I done to you? And I got down on my knees to her, and I literally got down on my knees, and I said, you've got no reason to believe me, but I will change. And something in my head switched, and I switched attitude, and I realized that I needed to put Kate first, and I'd never done that before. I'd never thought about doing that before. And everything changed from there. And thereafter, it's a story of fulfilling the mission, vocation, calling, whatever you like to call it.
The promise that is such.
But you don't want. I just know there are so many other Harry and Kates out there who needn't get into the mess that we got into. So unnecessary. And it's we had a painful recovery. It's been a long time. We're 37 years in now, but this happened at 8, and it took quite a few years to get through this, and we had big ups and downs on the way. But now it's just fabulous, really fabulous.
But I want to pause there, because as you said, there will be many Harry and Kates out there. As you say, you can so easily fall into stereotypical roles of, the husband going and doing the hard grafts at work, and the wife doing the hard grafts at home, but emotionally start to separate because you're not there for each other anymore as friends. What was it that changed in your mind? What was it that Kate said that made it come alive for you? What was happening?
Well, it was just this sense of this letter happened. We'd actually gone that day. Amazingly, I'd been having this very successful therapy to go and open up my own can of worms and learn that I can feel happy and sad and excited and exhilarated and exuberant and depressed and disillusioned or whatever. I suddenly discovered a vocabulary of feelings that I never had. Wow. But so we decided that I was at work, and we said, let's bring Kate in to my therapist, my friend. And so in we went, and Kate burst into tears about this whole thing. She just said, look, nothing's changed in 6 months. It's all very well you opening up. It's all very well becoming a fancy Christian and praying for people, but our marriage is still rubbish. And she burst into tears, at which point I was like a rabbit in the headlights, and my friendly therapist, my friend, said to me, Harry, do something. And I froze. I had no idea what to do. I didn't reach out and put a hand on her or something like that. I just did nothing, and I didn't know what to do. So we left this meeting. Can you imagine how further apart we were than ever?
Wow. Yeah.
And so that's what prompted her. When she went home and I went back to the office, she wrote this letter, and it was there sitting on my bed when I got back. Dear Harry, here are the terms and conditions for being your wife. And then, I really want to be your friend. Will I get that? Who knows? Who cares? And it just, the timing was right. The sense of despair really got through to me. It cut me to the core. And I saw how badly she'd been hurt and how much she needed to be loved and needed me to put her first. And it wasn't a big, it's not like a great, huge thing that happened, but it was like a little switch flicked in my head.
Yes.
And suddenly I realized, my goodness, that's what I need to do. I need, putting the kids first is actually putting me first, because I don't want to lose them. That's ultimately, it was a selfish thing. But ultimately, what I need to do is put her first. And when I started to do that, of course, I started to notice her. Just an example of that, actually. Sorry, I'm not giving you a chance to ask any questions.
No, go on. We're loving the story.
A very good example was of the change was that up until that point, I'd never really done compliments and affirmation. I never really had that in my life at all. So it never seemed a big deal, but it was an important deal to Kate. And it is an important deal to a lot of people. It's quite nice to be told, you're doing a great job, or you look great, or I love this. And Kate said, I overheard Kate saying to somebody at a party, Harry never compliments me. And I noticed it. That was the thing. And that's part of me putting her first, was I started to notice stuff. And I put a little Post-it note, one of those little yellow things, on my computer screen. And she laughed because it said compliments and affirmation. And she just thought, what an idiot. And that'll last, 2 minutes. Harry will change for 2 minutes and then he'll forget. But anyway, after about 6 months, the note lost its stickiness and fell off the screen, by which time I was starting to compliment and notice her and compliment her automatically.
To make a habit of it.
And I then heard her say to somebody, this was the winning moment. I then heard her say to somebody, oh, Harry compliments me, and I absolutely love it. He constantly compliments me all the time. And I thought, yes. And it's something that it's become completely automatic. And it's an interesting how you can learn to do so. You can choose to do something that's not in your nature, and then you can make it becomes automatic after a while, and it becomes a habit. And I think that's why our marriage has become, it's one of the weirdest things. I don't know if you've got to this stage yet, but our marriage has become very automatic in being comfortable with one another, and that we do little things that actually make the thing work.
Yeah.
rather than
You're
letting it.
speaking, you're so speaking our language because you're talking about the habits in
Yeah,
relationships that make them stronger, make them
yeah,
successful, and exchanging
Yeah.
those for habits that are damaging the relationships
absolutely.
unintentionally.
But they
But when you
become.
said sticky notes,
Well, let me say, to develop that habit, I thought it was just saddle me. I figured to do things that are different. I had that. I put it in my diary. Put it
Did
in my
you?
diary because I know I'm looking at my diary all the time. I used to put it in there, because Andrea, like Kate, apparently, loves the compliments, and that's it's just. I mean, when people compliment me, my instinct is, what do you want from me? Are you
you feel
patronizing me? Do you want?
patronized.
Do you,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I either feel patronized, or you must be looking for something. You're just,
yeah.
you're trying to get something. That's why you're giving giving that away. So I don't naturally give compliments as a result. But
Yeah.
Andrea loves compliments.
The
She
words of
feeds off
affirmation
them.
is my love
Exactly.
language. Yeah.
So I had to put it in my diary. Look, tell Andrea the compliments. So it's just not me, not just me. So happy to hear that.
Right.
And
Well,
I
let
want,
me just say then that, John, I don't care really what you look like today, but Andrea, you look absolutely fabulous.
There you go.
you're my friend, Harry. You're my
Her
friend.
next question to you then would be why? Why? Tell me why. Since you're looking for more,
No, I
But
like
I
the
wanted,
shirt. You look beautiful.
There you go.
You present
Harry,
Just
yourself
keep
so
going.
well. You're polite. You're kind in the way you talk to people.
listen,
Is that
if
enough?
that will do for the moment. We'll come back to that. But if that's a skill and a habit that you've developed, how
Yeah.
worth it was it?
Oh yeah.
This if we lift the conversation to, there was this, I don't know if you saw this article recently. I can't even remember which paper, but it was talking about how after a few years of marriage, in the beginning, the amount of love or the sense of feeling
yes.
loved is equal between in a heterosexual relationship. This is where they did the study, equal between the man and the woman. But after a few years, it changed it negligibly for the men. But for the woman, the sense of feeling in love fell by something like 70 or 80%. And it goes back to exactly what you're saying. In the beginning of the relationship, the focus, the love, the attention is on the woman. After marriage, and especially after children, life for the woman tends to change so much more dramatically in a lot of cases, because of the kids, because of the housework, because of all the things that they're juggling. And if they're not getting the same affirmation, the same attention, the same sense of you're my number one that you would have had through courting days, of course the sense of being in love or loving this relationship will change. That made so much sense to me, and that was the research that they did. I don't know if
I think it was a Harvard Business Review or McKinsey Review, one of them.
we'll
We saw
have
it
to look
online.
it up, because
Yeah.
it was just so it's these simple habits to become intentional about doing it and
Yeah.
keeping your spouse as number one, even when life changes with kids or jobs or loss of jobs or whatever, to keep that focus. That's a habit to
But
go
jumping in
from.
for a second, though, what I love, Harry, though, is speaks to this article, as you said, it completely blindsided you. You weren't expecting that.
Yeah.
In your mind, things were still okay, possible, livable. But from her side, she wasn't seeing that or feeling that at all.
No, she was feeling smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah. I suspect it's not a panacea, but I love the idea of her writing you the letter.
Yeah.
But as you said, it had to be the right timing. You had to be in the right place to hear it. Had she written that letter maybe a year before or 2 years before, it might be like, what's this all about, kind of a thing. So certainly not a panacea, but something really helpful to
No, I'm a
put
big
that in
fan
place.
of letters, actually. I think letters are very helpful, especially for men, because often you can feel like you want to say something. I mean, this is horribly genderized, but you can feel like you want to say something, and you're not going to get shot down, questioned, whatever. You've got a chance to say what you really want to say.
Yeah.
And also the other person, Kate's message got through to me. I was listening and shutting up because I'm reading a letter.
Yes.
Sometimes it's quite good to just listen and shut up, and a letter does that.
Yeah, where you can just say what you need to say in an uninterrupted way and without all the emotions get interrupting. The other thing you said, which I think is really powerful, because a lot of men struggle with this, is that you went to therapy. That's a big deal. What prompted you or helped you make that decision to go to therapy?
Oh, I tell you what, I went there under duress.
Yeah,
because
not surprised.
at that stage, back in where are we? We're in the mid 1990s now, and at that stage, the thought was that if you went to therapy, then that was something that Californians sent their poodles to.
Yeah.
And it was just extreme. Now, I mean, I now know lots of people are very comfortable with the idea, but it was it got even worse than that, because it was some friends of ours actually, and in fact, I think the importance of wise friends cannot be underestimated when you're going through difficult times. Having wise friends to be there. I'm much more of a fan of having wise friends to help couples through difficult times than I am going anywhere near marriage counselling or, God forbid, relate or whatever. Go and talk to wise friends who aren't going to take side. We had a wonderful couple who had been sort of watching our descent into oblivion, and we went for dinner with them, and they said, Harry, how do you see, what do you think of when you think of Kate? And, most people would think, well, she's bubbly and vivacious and she's kind and she's gentle and she's great with people, all that sort of thing. You'd have normal things like that. I couldn't think of a single thing. Honestly, I couldn't think of anything except that she was a professional cook. So I said, unbelievably, she understands the chemistry of cooking, which is like
not even like she makes great dinners for me.
It's like the stupidest thing you can possibly say. But I thought, I was impressed by that, because it was something that always absolutely impressed me. But I couldn't verbalize any of the other stuff about how she was as a person. And they thought, okay, Harry, I think we need to get you somewhere. So they recommended a therapist or counsellor. And I went to, who actually happened to be a Christian counsellor, although the Christian bit I don't think ever really particularly came into it. And I said, look, one mention of God and I'm out of there, because I was an atheist. So it's bad enough going to counselling. It was even worse, the idea of going to a Christian counsellor. She was sensational. She was really fabulous. And she took me into my childhood and she helped me see some of the pain I'd experienced and whatever. And she helped me work my way through it. And I suddenly discovered emotions, and it was fabulous. And it was a fascinating experience, and I highly recommend it. As a logical, very closed man thinking, oh, this is all a load of nonsense. Actually, it was brilliant. It was fascinating, and she was great. I mean, if you got a rubbish one, I can imagine it's dire.
And not wanting to go back.
She was so smart. She was super smart. And she did some pretty high intensity therapy on me, but in a very clever way. It didn't feel like that. It was just, she took me back to, what's your first memory and what was it like and where do you feel hurt and all that sort of stuff. And I drew a picture of it, and I wrote a letter to my father, which, unlike Prince Harry, I never sent. That's how to explode your family, is actually to wash your dirty linen in public. You do this stuff in private, so that you can then deal with the difficult stuff in public. So I did all that stuff, and I got angry and blah blah blah, and I discovered emotions. It was fantastic, and it actually was probably only about 10 sessions altogether. But that was enough.
Some really important life lessons about just being aware of where you stand with emotions, and the fact that you'd bottled it up all these years and you didn't know how to express it. And as they say, if you bottle any of it, you're really compromising all of it, and you're not able to show any emotions in the appropriate way in a relationship. So knowing getting a language and an understanding around emotions, getting counseling if you need it, writing a letter to your partner to explain what you're going through, all those things are such great insights and tips to help people who might find themselves in that place. And also developing good habits, even if it means writing a reminder to yourself on a yellow post-it and sticking it on your computer. Develop the habits that build success. Amazing.
I go ahead of everyone so that you can see how bad I am and you feel better about yourself.
Not at all. You've done the journey so that others have the confidence that they can do it as well. So we understand the background and how it's created this passion to really help and support marriages. What's the passion now? What's the thing that's driving your focus now?
Well, after we started to get our act together, I gave up my finance business in Asia and came back. I did a psychology degree at Bristol University. I set up a charity teaching relationship skills, kind of stuff that you do with Full Habits, similar sort of
Yes, I
thing.
remember.
But this was love languages, bad habits, all sorts of stuff. And it was as much as possible research-based. And I ran courses for about 10 years in Bristol and taught thousands of people in different settings. In prison, I did a lot of prison courses, antenatal courses for new mums. We worked in the Sure Start children's centres. It's fantastic. And then, of course, pre-marriage courses as well. And then I realised, actually, I had a chat to a friend of mine who was an academic in the States who was talking about, we were talking about, how can you have most impact? And she said, just a little throwaway comment, if we could only change the way people start and what the foundation of people's relationships, we could avoid a lot of this difficulty of having to help people sort their stuff out later on.
Absolutely.
And so I thought, yeah, you're right. And so I was ready to move to the next stage, which was to go into marriage foundation, as it turned out. And I bumped into a guy called Sir Paul Coleridge, who was a former High Court judge, who was actually serving High Court judge at that time. And he and I were interviewed separately for a panorama program, which was, very fancy on BBC. And he saw me, I saw him. We got together, we met, and we decided to start. He wanted to start a marriage foundation, and so that's what I've been doing. I've been doing research for that for the last 12 years. But a couple of years ago, I decided we've done a lot of research, fantastic research on the Marriage Foundation website, and I'd say it's fantastic. You be the judge of it, but the media publish our stories all the time. Like today, we front page of the Times, which is really cool, and
lots of great insights.
Yeah, and as I say, we've learned so much from you and from the research that you've done at the Marriage Foundation.
Thank you. And of course, it's all rooted in actually keeping your stuff together at home, which is kind of important. But I realised a couple of years ago, actually, I thought I'd been putting off this thing called a PhD that I've been I've been trying to avoid it for a long time, trying to do research without, being a proper academic. And so I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years at the University of Bristol. I've got 2 fabulous supervisors. One of whom is an expert on single mums, which is very helpful for me because it keeps me grounded. It keeps my language very clear, and it keeps me very focused, very non-judgmental, and very much stuck with what the data's saying, what the research is saying. So I'm pretty ruthless about that. But hopefully I'm going to wrap up my PhD this year, looking at who stays together and who splits up during the course of parenthood, which amazingly nobody's looked at until now.
Oh, really?
And what that tells us about commitment. And I've found a few things which I hope, and my goal at the end of it is that I want to publish some academic papers which change the thinking of the civil servants in British politics who block an awful lot of policies. I know, and from talking to people in think tanks and other think tanks like ours and Centre for Social Justice and Civitas and Centre for Policy Studies, all sorts of people, IPPR, whatever. The civil service block an awful lot of stuff because they've got this idea that marriage doesn't matter. And my research has shown, look, it's the psychology of marriage says it really ought to matter. When you make proposals, there's a lot of decision making, which has a lot of effect on the way we see ourselves, and the way you see each other, and the way you treat each other, and how confident you feel. Then there's weddings, which have an effect. There's social affirmation, social acceptability, all sorts of things, social confirmation. There's lots of things that happen in the process of getting married automatically, which ought to make people more likely to stick together, rather than just being, as the chattering classes like to say, oh, it's just the kind of people who marry, they're just richer or older or whatever.
Yes, it's just a ceremony.
But the psychology of it is so compelling. And that's really what I want to get across. And my findings in my study is very clearly that people who marry do much better. They're much more likely to stay together across income groups, across age groups, across happiness, across all sorts of sectors, whatever. And that's really good for children because ultimately, I'm in the business about helping Harrys and Kates stay together who needn't split up in order that their kids are brought up And the bottom line in my family is my two oldest children have been brought up with two intact parents who've broadly speaking, got on with each other.
Yeah.
And I've got four more children who wouldn't exist if we hadn't got our act together, hadn't sorted our stuff together. And they've got a legacy from us, which we've given them, and they will then be able to give to their children, to my new grandchild who was born this week. That whole generational legacy thing is really important. So even if, I have zero impact in the wider world, my PhD goal is to influence public policy with published papers. So that's where I'm going with that. And I want to change government policy on marriage, because at the moment, the government policy doesn't really distinguish between marriage and cohabiting, as if that, it's just a piece of paper. It's just a thing that people either do. And yet all the rich guys, they're all married.
Exactly.
Go figure. They want to do it. They do it for a reason. They know there's something about the security, the promise, the decision, the plan, the signal, the social, the social affirmation that you get, etc. All of these things, they know it. People know it, and yet our policy argues against it. So that's where I'm going with this. Is I want to change government policy. We've tried with the media for the last 12 years, and it's great. It's great. You get fancy stories like today. But I want to get into the public sector.
Yeah. I was going to say, what you said earlier about, you were talking about yourself, I think, where you were saying, I'm selfish and you wanted something out of it. I think our big recognition in working in relationships for the last 30 years is that fundamentally we are all selfish as individuals. We all want what works for us. And I think if you're messaging, somehow you can get to speak to the politicians, and it's all about what's in it for me. So if you can say to them, this is what's in it for you, if the people listening are thinking, this is what's in it for me, and actually quite often we think, I might want to do it for my children, but ultimately you're not going to do it for the children. You'll do it for you if there's a benefit for you. So it really comes down to that. And how do we underline that message and give everybody something for them?
Well, I think the research will be great to put figures around it. And I'm blown away that yours will be the first. So, of course, amazing that this is your passion and you're going for it. But anecdotally, we know in general that if you have a companion doing something with, chances are you'll stick with it. You'll go to the gym if somebody's going to hold you accountable. You'll turn up and, do the business project if you're not on your own. On days when you're down, they can lift you up, I think intuitively we understand that a really committed relationship will get you much further in life than just a casual, or not even a casual commitment, something that still has question marks over it. And the point you made, Harry, about the process you go through in the decision to get married, a lot of these questions and decisions about the long-term commitment have to be addressed up front. Can you tell us some more about the whole psychology of marriage and why it is distinctly different from the decision to cohabit?
Yeah. Well, you don't want to know the whole psychology of marriage.
Relevant
but let me give you a little tiny piece.
Yes, please.
Yeah, when you get together, what you're trying to do in a relationship is you're trying to remove ambiguity. You're trying to find out where we're going with this. You want ultimately some sense of security, confidence, knowledge of where the other person is. And that's a sort of growing process. And you do that while you're dating or courting or whatever term you like to use, or going out together. But you're trying to remove ambiguity. You're trying to establish that you have a relationship, that you're boyfriend and girlfriend initially, or that you're then partners, or whatever you are. And you've got something, and there's a destination, or you're removing ambiguity. But you also ultimately, you need to get rid of this problem that you can have different levels of commitment. Someone might say, okay, well, I'm in this relationship for life. Another person might say, well, I can see it going 5 years or 10 years, but I don't really want to commit more than that. Well, that's horrendous. That's horrible, because in that kind of relationship, you've got this mismatch of commitment. You've got one person saying they're really into it, and the other person saying not quite so sure. And that means the person who's got the power in the relationship is the one who's more willing to pull the plug, who doesn't care.
Yeah.
And more often that's the man. So you want to find patriarchy, you'll find it in cohabiting relationships much more than you will in marriage. I mean, that blows people's minds when they think about it. Patriarchy is alive and well in cohabiting relationships where men are living with often women who really think this is it, and yet they haven't actually ever expressed that point, and they're
that
conning,
commitment.
they're conning themselves and they're conning other people to think that actually I'm in this for as long as you are, but actually they're not really. They haven't made that act of commitment. And what happens with marriage is that it automates this process of giving you as much confidence as you possibly can. And we know there's no guarantees. Marriages fail for sure. Although, having said that, divorce rates are at the lowest they've been since the 1960s now, which also people don't realise, because the people who are marrying are just doing it because they really want to. But the process of marriage involves a proposal. So you've got things like you've got a decision. Decisions give you confidence. You've got a plan that starts to remove any kind of ambiguity. Signal, really important. Signals and signals have to involve sacrifice. If I say I'm going to spend the day with you, you might think, oh, well, that's nice of Harry. But if I tell you I'm spending the day with you, but I'm actually giving up a day I was going to spend going to some sporting event in order to spend the day with you, that's a sacrifice. That's
different
much
message.
more committed. Different message. So when you get married, you're signaling that you're actually giving up all the other choices in order to choose that one person. And that's a massive risk. And of course, getting married is a huge risk because you're burning all your bridges all in one go. But what you're doing is you're putting yourself on the same level playing field. You're also, there's some really cool psychology behind it, which goes that when you make decisions and act upon a decision, what happens is that you tend to become more confident about the thing you've chosen and less confident about the things you've rejected. So if you bought a car, for example, there's two cars that look much the same, and you choose that car. After you've made the decision, you will widen that gap. And it's called cognitive consistency theory, which is kind of like the opposite of cognitive dissonance. But it's what you're doing is you're widening the gap to give yourself more confidence that, hey, I made a great choice here.
That's the right decision.
Yeah. So that's really cool. People don't think about this stuff. They say, oh, it's just a piece of paper. No, it isn't. You're making a decision and you're acting upon it. And then you get married and you've got all the people saying, well done, great choice, because you're taking this unbelievably risky choice. You do it on your own, it's terrifying. But if you suddenly, everyone says, great choice, Harry, good job. But you're also slightly holding yourself accountable as well. You're putting a little bit of a barrier around you, which makes it slightly harder for you to leave. You've got to tell all your friends and embarrass yourself again.
All the people who came to church and bought you presents.
Or civil ceremony, as most are now. But, these are really important stuff.
And I love the fact that you're going to have figures around it to show, because so many times the conversation around why marriage gets camouflaged in the politics, or, lots of negative emotions beginning to be associated with the word without realizing it's the stability, it's the commitment, it's the decisions that need to be made up front that makes it a uniquely and a very special commitment, a very special foundation for doing life together.
I think the thing to remember about marriage is that it isn't a guarantee. It's not a panacea, but it goes with the grain of human nature. So it accounts for our natural selfishness and failings, and it brings people together with all these decisions and plans and signals and social affirmation, and it points you in a direction. And you can apply all those ingredients without going through the process of marriage. But ultimately, you're still going to have to apply those ingredients one by one. So even if you don't call it marriage, you're going to actually end up having to go through something like that. So successful cohabiting couples almost certainly gone through a similar process to married couples in some way or another, that they've actually expressed their commitment to one another in a similar sort of way, but without, they just haven't called it marriage. But there's a reason why societies have chosen marriage, this idea of marriage in whatever form it is, for thousands of years in almost all societies, because it bonds particularly men to the mothers of their future children. And that's really important, because the mum is the one who's got all the risks when you get pregnant. You need the bloke to be around, and the psychology of marriage makes that more likely to happen.
And this idea of two pulling together in the same direction yields many more benefits. Of course, it creates a stable family. It creates the home for children to grow up in with more confidence and being able to process their emotions. But there's research out there, isn't there, that even in terms of wealth, that couples that are committed and aligned around finances, for example, will compound their wealth. There was one conversation we had recently with Rob Gardner. He said 77% more faster. Couples who are committed to each other, they accumulate wealth 77% faster than single people or couples who aren't as aligned around finances. And of course, you talk about the gap that those who are in the highest wealth brackets, most of them are married. No surprises there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's important to point out that, this is about couples staying together. But if you stay together, you're much more likely to accumulate wealth. But you're much more likely to stay together if you get married in the first place, because the psychology is so compelling. And some people, it will simply affirm their commitment. Others, it will boost it. For a small minority, there are couples who get married for legal reasons or some kind of bureaucratic reasons or whatever. It might be immigration or something like that. But most people, either it's to cement what you've already got or to boost what you've already got. And either way, it's a good thing, and we turn our backs on it at our peril.
And of course, we're not just talking about staying together for the sake of it and staying in a miserable marriage or staying in a miserable relationship where it's all just horrible, or an abusive relationship, God forbid. But we're talking about staying together and actually working on the relationship and making it work,
developing the skills and the habits. I think that's a great segue actually to you mentioned earlier the challenges that you had and how you overcame it. What are some of the what relationship advice? What's the best relationship advice that was shared with you, or that you've learned that you want to share with everybody and pass on to your children and grandchildren?
I think the best piece of advice I've ever been given as a parent was start a quote book. Absolutely hilarious. You'll never remember start a quote book. Yeah, it was Nikki and Silla Lee who run the marriage course years ago. This is probably 25 years ago. They said we run a quote book, and I remember listening. I remember talking to them about this, and they said it's absolutely hilarious. All your wedding speeches are all written for you, and you'll never remember. And it is. I promise you, you will thank me if you've got young children. Start a quote book, because you're never going to remember what they say otherwise. That was the best advice I think I've ever been given outside.
Wonderful.
The advice that I would give to others, though, is that I think first of all, get married, because it's the best way to show commitment to one another. Why on earth wouldn't you? People think we have to defend marriage. No, you need to defend. Why aren't you getting married? People want to get married. There's a reason for it. You don't have to do all the fancy ceremony stuff and spend a fortune. The rich and poor alike used to get married years ago. There's ways of doing it without spending a fortune. But getting married gives you this psychological boost, which stacks the odds in your favor. But I think my message really is something that came out of when I wrote a book called What Mums Want and Dads Need to Know with Kate, actually, and it ended up as a bestseller. It got to number 11 on Amazon. I mean, amazing.
A fantastic book.
And thank you. And
we've got a copy of it here, which I believe you gave us, actually.
Good. Read Linwood Digest. No, but the key thing is that the responsibility for a successful relationship, once you have children, rests with dad. And that's a very uncomfortable message, I think, for a lot of people, because they say, it should be equal and it should be fair. But mum's focus is so much on shifts to children. She's the one who got pregnant. She's the one who spent 9 months growing a fetus that then becomes your child. And her attention automatically when the baby's born is unavoidably towards the child. So the point is, it's very easy to let your relationship go. The person who has capacity to focus on the relationship is dad. So we all tend to think dad's responsibility is to earn the money and, be the provider and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, maybe to some extent. There's nothing wrong with that. But actually, what mums want, and we asked 300 mums what they wanted, what they really wanted most of all was they wanted a friend, someone who was interested in them and their children, and someone who was kind. And that's it. So I think husbands love your wives, and they will love you right back. You'll get back everything you ever wanted.
And more.
And more, absolutely. Because why wouldn't your wife give you so much back if you're being a great husband? I mean, that's the way it works. But it starts with you. So that's my message to blokes. Big one is A, get married. B, prioritize your relationship. And your job as a bloke, your role as a man, and we've lost sight of men's roles in society, but your primary role is the responsibility for the relationship.
That is such a powerful message.
Love that. And then you were saying that before we came on the call, you were saying, I think that was your advice to your son, I think, wasn't it?
Our son-in-law.
I wrote a letter to my son-in-law. And he read it out with my daughter, actually. He's kept the letter. But I wrote the letter. You never know. I might have to write a book on this one of these days.
So say there were three things. There were three things you said that the husband should do. The last one was be kind, which is really powerful because it's so easy to be harsh and to be mean, especially finances are tight or everybody's tired. But there were two other things you said that I wanted to capture again.
Okay,
of course,
three things that mums want. Three things mums want. This is the things that came out head and shoulders above everything else. Providing, being an action man, being cool and fit and all that stuff was fine, but it wasn't the big deal. The big deal was that mums want someone who's a friend, who's kind, kind and interested in them and the children. That's it. How hard is that? But that's very, very intentional, very proactive. And utterly rewarding. And eventually you get to the stage. We've got to, smug me sitting here 37 years down the line, having been through this horrible process of having to learn it the hard way, so that you don't have to, it's become very automatic now that I know I've got responsibility for the relationship. That doesn't mean I'm dictatorial, it doesn't mean I make the decisions, anything like that. It just means if something goes wrong, it's my job to sort it out. Yeah. And it's if something's going right, it's my job to keep it that way.
And that's just so powerful because for us men, the amount of conversations we've had with guys who come to us and say, look, things aren't working so well, I just don't know what to do. At least now they've got three things to do: be a friend, be kind, and just be interested in them.
Exactly.
We like that.
Yeah.
And even more than that, there are clear habits, which is what we teach. There are clear habits that you can learn and develop and become intentional about, even if it means having post-it stickers all over the place to remind you of the things to do. There are specific practical things you can do that help you build a successful relationship.
Well, 100%. Speaking to those 3 points, the 4 habits that we talk about, playing our trumpet a little bit here, absolutely help you be a friend, be kind, and be interested in the person. So it's absolutely, that's the end result that you will get, is bang on with what the mums are looking for. We could talk for hours on this, Harry, but I'm conscious of time.
You're in danger of getting a compliment from me here. You're fantastic.
When you finish the PhD, and we're rooting for you to get it done this year, we'll have to have you back to tell us all the other things you found, the statistics that support some of the messages that seem to be emerging. So that'd be amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But if people want to find out a bit more about you and the fabulous work you're doing, where can we direct them?
marriagefoundation.org.uk. We've got a website full of hopefully interesting research reports that are very accessible, particularly if you read the press releases or the blogs. We've had a lot of media coverage, obviously. And so it's designed to be accessible and to give you confidence that marriage really makes a difference.
Yeah,
and
amazing.
And then if people want to find out more about the work you're doing with the mums, there's a book, isn't there, in that space?
Yeah, it's still on Amazon.
It's still in print. But it came out a few years ago, but I think it's still valid today. What mums want and dads need to know, and you can find it on Amazon.
There are a lot of dads out there that need to know, so hopefully we'll get some of our listeners tuning into that and picking that book up
Exactly.
and getting some of that
Yeah,
wisdom.
blokes, read it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The mums already know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful.
Harry, amazing as always. Thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us, and we look forward to the next time.
Please do.
Thank
But
you.
meanwhile, enjoy being granddad for the first time.
I am already.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Harry.
Thanks.
Cheers. See you hopefully again soon.
Indeed.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.